Okay, it looks like we're ready to get started. I believe we're recording. Seth, if you could just confirm that. No, we're live. Seth, am I waiting for the record icon to show up on the screen? Oh, and we're recording
the light
too?
just came on.
Oh, okay, excellent. Okay, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's the September 23rd, 2021 Police Reform Implementation Task Force meeting. I'm going to call the members present: Supervisor Syed, Councilman Bill McPartlin, Comptroller Ismet Alam, Chief of Police Jordan Koshan. We have Town Attorney Paul Briggs. We have our PBA representative Jeffrey Relation, Manuel Amato. Dale Black Pennington is absent at the moment. Marina Prop Franchild is present. Allison Marinucci is absent, and we have Paul Zonderman here with us as well. So first, we're going to approve the minutes. So I'm going to motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second on that motion? Thank you. Are there any changes to those minutes?
No.
Okay, seeing no changes, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And those minutes are approved. So next, I'd like to discuss our next steps, and we discussed this last meeting. I'd like for us to appoint a chair, a vice chair, a parliamentarian, and a secretary. As I stated during the last meeting, I nominated our town attorney, Paul Briggs, to serve as our parliamentarian. And Paul, if you had any other suggestions?
Yes, I'd like to nominate Judge Paul Zonderman to be the chair. Judge Zonderman has a long time history with the town as our town justice. He's worked closely with the police in that role. He also has extensive experience as an arbitrator, and I think he'd be the perfect fit to be our chair. I would nominate him to be our chair.
Excellent. Thank you. So we have a second. And so the motion, I'll just specify our chair as Paul Zonderman and our parliamentarian as Paul Briggs. So we had a second on that motion, correct? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, excellent. So we have a chair and a parliamentarian. Do I have any nominations from the floor for a vice chair or a secretary? If not, we can wait on those nominations for another time. Okay.
I mean, if nobody, I didn't particularly want anything, but
Mhm.
I don't want to volunteer for something either. Well, not a secretary because my handwriting sucks.
Okay, vice chair.
Unless anybody else wants to step up, I have no problem.
I haven't heard from anyone so
Is
far.
that all right with you?
Okay. All right. So I'm going to make a motion to nominate Manny Amato as vice chair. Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, excellent. So we have appointed a chair, a vice chair, a parliamentarian, and we will wait on a secretary for the time being. I can keep the minutes, calculate the minutes for any forthcoming meetings until we have designated a secretary. So next, we're going to adopt our rules of parliamentary procedure, as is customary for all of our town meetings here at the town of Niskuna. We follow Robert's Rules of Order, so I'm going to make a motion to adopt Robert's Rules of Order as our parliamentary procedure. Do I have a second on that motion? Thank you. So we have a second. Is there any discussion on that topic? Okay, seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we have our rules of parliamentary procedure adopted as Robert's Rules of Order. So I do have as a next item, and we can always, jump to a different way. Now, if the chair wishes to do so, go ahead.
Drain it. We're ready to go. Let's go.
Excellent. So as outlined in the plan, there are there's a path to how we accomplish all of the recommendations. And so one of the paths is that possibly work groups are formed, and we could form a budget work group and a timeline work group. And I think those two work groups could work independently but in concert. Each one of these recommendations, if there is a cost to it, some of these don't have a cost, but many of them do. So a budget work group could be individuals that could focus specifically on attaching a cost estimate to any and all of the recommendations. Now, of course, that would be absent the ones that there are no costs, but they would have a determination, either, cost and what that cost is, or no cost. And also there could be a timeline work group whereby that work group is going to determine initiatives that have already been put into place, because some of them have been already, which is great. Identify the short-term goals and then identify the long-term goals. And then ultimately we can mesh those two, those two separate but equal endeavors. I'm hearing myself echoing. Okay. So we can mesh those two endeavors ultimately. And so that way we have all of our already implemented initiatives, our short and long-term goals, and then we can have the cost or no cost attached to those as well. I think that would be a good jumping off point. If anybody else has any other ideas, of course, I'm open to them. This is going to be a collaborative process. Yes, sir.
Okay, is that better? Okay. Are we able to have? Oh, I'm sorry. It's been so long. I've been retired. Is it possible for us to get copies of the initiatives and what has been started and what not has? So somebody like me, I don't know what has been attempted.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And that's something that I would like to work on initially with our Chief Jordan Koshan and our PBA representative, Jeff Relation, to identify if and what initiatives have already been put into place. So that way we're not duplicating efforts. And that would be good to know as a starting off point. And yes, that can be done. So that's something that we can do. We can identify a group of people to take on that task so that by the time we are having our next meeting, we can at least have that list promulgated and circulated to everyone to identify which recommendations have already been implemented. Certainly, we can do that as a next step as a group.
May I ask, I think I circulated a copy of the report and appendix. It's a large document. If anybody doesn't have that, let me know and I'll get you a copy of it. It's a thick document, and it really sets forth the outline that the supervisor is talking about as to where the recommendations, and of course the committee has to review those and make the decisions about how to implement those and the potential cost. But if anybody needs this, please, Manny needs one. If anybody else needs one, let me know.
Marina Francheld, I don't believe that I have one. If you could send it to me, I'd appreciate it.
I'll be sure you get that, Marina. Anyone else? So I got Manny and Paul and Marina. Jeff too, okay.
Yeah, Paul, hi, this is Ismet. Can we send it to the whole team just as FII?
Sure.
Also, I just have a question in terms of Robert's rule. Can we add something to the agenda or not?
Yes. Anytime you want to add something to the agenda, we're not as formal as Robert. We follow Robert's rules more so for procedural issues such as taking votes, quorums, that sort of thing. But for the conduct of the meeting, we're not that formal at all. We're more than willing to have people add items to the agenda, and it doesn't take it just takes a request, not even a motion.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry.
Sure.
What I would like to have added to the agenda, and somebody else on the task force actually mentioned this. I don't remember if it was in an email or where I saw this, but the fact that
We're losing you, Marina.
the investigation into NPD, Michael Stevens, that it was dropped, that there's like no transparency, that it's all being handled internally. I have a real problem with this, and I want to discuss it.
We can discuss that, Marina. One of the issues that comes about with issues such as that is these are personnel issues, and I've read in the paper about lack of transparency, but there's certain personnel issues that we're just prohibited from discussing publicly. But there's certainly limits that we can discuss that. So that's certainly something that I'll add to the agenda.
Right, because I understand if you can't discuss the particulars about an individual. However, things trickle down, policy procedure trickles down from the top. If you have somebody who is the head of the department who does not have a progressive agenda, then this whole implementation task force is doomed to failure. You need somebody in leadership who has a progressive understanding of policing, who understands systemic racism, who understands the need for training on a very comprehensive level. If you don't have that, if you have somebody with a record, I'm not talking about this gentleman, I'm just speaking hypothetically, where they endorse bodily force, you know, like chokeholds, for example, then there's like no point in having this task force. So for me, that's a bottom line issue. Thank you.
So Marina, if I could just follow up, is your question about who is currently leading the department, or who is in the department's administration? Because I will state that, you know, one of the questions that the town board did ask of all of the candidates was what their feelings and thoughts were on the police reform implementation task force and the collaborative. And, you know, that was very important to us. And we knew that it was very important to our residents as well. And we believe the choice we made is reflective of the fact that both our chief of police as well as the town board are committed to implementing reform. So if I could just ask you to clarify a little bit what exactly your question is.
I truly appreciate what you're saying, Yasmin. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is that it would be very, very helpful if we could know what the questions are that are asked in a screening process, and to have some sense of the due diligence that follows such questions. I'm not asking for results of a particular person. I understand that's a personnel issue. I do understand that.
Okay.
Hi, this is Allison Marinucci. I'm sorry, I hopped on a little late. I had issues with my son. So just to circle back with Marina said, just for clarity, when the hearing went from public to private, is the official position, just because people in the community, obviously you've seen editorial and things like that, the optics are not great. Is the official position that this is strictly a personnel issue?
Yeah.
Correct.
Thank you. That's the question.
Yes, sir.
Just a comment. We are not a disciplinary review board, not yet. Part 2, employee discipline is always private, and
For a reason.
for reasons, because there are a lot of accusations.
Got to speak into the mic, please. Speak closer to the mic.
That's all.
Okay.
Is there anything anyone else would like to add on that topic? Okay.
We were not able to hear what the gentleman just said.
That was Mr.
Okay.
Zonderman, Judge Zonderman. Please repeat what you said, Judge.
I said that we are not a disciplinary review board, at least not yet. I'm not sure what our recommendations will be. And the second part was employee discipline is and has always been personal and confidential. So there's a problem with even exposing us to it at this point, but certainly the public. This is, there was no trial, there was no finding of guilt. And it just becomes an embarrassment if allegations are put out to the public.
I think I heard the gist of what he said, Marina. So what he was saying was that we are not a disciplinary board and allegations are usually private. And I understand that. I guess the point that I was trying to make, and that this is a police reform board, and I think a big piece of that is transparency. So just that the optics of this, I understand what you're saying, but the optics of it being public and being a public hearing and then very abruptly being private, I think that made a lot of the citizens suspect. That's all I think the point that we were trying to make. And it sounds like the official position is that it's private, and was private for a reason, and that there aren't going to be any further details as to why it went from a public hearing to private.
Well, I can at least comment on the procedural part of that. A hearing of that type is brought pursuant to Civil Service Law, Section 75. It's normally a closed hearing. The statute says it's a closed hearing unless the person against whom the charges are brought requests that it be made public. There was some claims before the hearing that it was going to be public, but we would have never known that until the actual commencement of the hearing, at which time the person who's the recipient of the charges requests that it be made public. So that hearing is routinely a not public hearing because it's a personnel matter. It's rare, very rare. Our outside counsel that was assisting the town in that has attended hundreds of these, participated in hundreds of these, and he's only had one in his many years where the person against whom the charges were brought asked it to be public. So the town didn't suddenly make it private. It was always a closed hearing unless the person against whom the charges were brought requested it be public. I hope that gives you some sort of an answer without having to detail the specifics.
Or is that what occurred?
Excuse me?
Did the individual that requested it to be public, because it sounds like this is very unusual. It sounds like it's almost always private, but it's public when the person whom the allegations are against requested it to be public. So did he request it to be private? Like, change his mind essentially?
No, once the charges were withdrawn by the supervisor, it now took it out of the Civil Service Section 75 procedural rules that operate under that section, and it then became an internal town employee matter. So it never went from private to public or public to private. Once the civil service charges were withdrawn, then any other issues concerning that officer were being handled internally. So it never went from public to private. It was always private. There was the attorney for the party was asking it, what had said in the press, maybe he was going to request that it be public. Normally they're not, because the employee doesn't want all of the allegations to be made public. They're always done privately, but we didn't ever get to that point because the town made the decision to handle the matter internally rather than through the Civil Service Article 75 procedure.
Gotcha.
I just want to say one more thing. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but it suggests the fact that the town didn't know certain things about this individual that then came to light. It suggests that there's something amiss in the hiring procedure. That's how it strikes me. I don't know the internals, so I'm not trying to be negative or to impugn the procedure, but just from a 50-yard distance, this is what it looks like. I wonder if you could please comment on that.
The hiring procedure is another whole somewhat complicated process. I imagine that's going to be something that we're going to take up at great length There are many variations and many requirements. I don't know whether we follow them or not, but we will know them and then certainly take that up.
Judge Zonerman, I don't think anybody can hear you. I'm sorry. I can't hear you either.
He's coming. Can you hear me, Chief?
I can, Paul.
Yeah, he's coming through on our speaker system here in the board meeting room. So I'm surprised you can't hear him, because if we hear ourselves come across, usually that means that you should be hearing us.
We all of us, we can't hear this, Judge.
But essentially what the judge said was that that's something that the committee is going to look into, is how the town goes about hiring police officers and what we take into account. And that's certainly something that who's now going to be Chair Zonderman believes should be an issue that we should address. And I agree.
And if I can just speak for a minute, is it okay if I call you Marina? Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
Just to touch on a couple things, I know there's a lot of concern in the community right now because there is a lot of news media coverage regarding these things. I will say to you that I'm committed to working with this task force. I'm committed to change. I'm committed to listening to every voice. And we are going to work as a community to make our police department better and more transparent moving forward. Can't change what's happened in the past. I don't even know all the particulars of every single thing, but I can promise our community that I'm willing to listen and to make changes that are appropriate for our police department to better serve our community.
Chief Jordan Cochan, I've actually interfaced with you in terms of Dean Street Park, and I just think you're a terrific person, and I believe in you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marina. I appreciate that.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments, agenda items to be added from the floor at this time? Okay. All right, so we can set our next meeting date, although I think it worked quite well to do the doodle poll. I'm seeing some head nods, so I trust that was the best way to accomplish getting our next meeting date set. I will task our newly appointed chair and vice chair with trying to get a sense of how often we want these meetings. So by the time we convene for our next meeting, I think we've identified that we're going to have as a next step that internally we're going to group together and we're going to identify which recommendations have already been implemented. And if I could ask of our chair and our vice chair that they identify, roughly speaking, when we're going to meet and how often and what that's going to look like. But on our end, internally, I will have my confidential secretary, Brian Backus, once again circulate a doodle poll so that we can at least get a next meeting on the calendar. All meetings are posted to our Town of Niskuna web meeting calendar, as well as the login information for both the public and us as well. So I'm anticipating that we're still going to be running hybrid meetings by the time we meet next, if we meet next month, or, it might be, I think between the last meeting and this meeting, it might have been 4.5, 5 weeks. So even whether it's October or November, in all likelihood, we'll continue the hybrid model. I think it works quite well for especially some of our members who have work constraints too. So we will proceed in that fashion. So any other points before I motion to adjourn? Okay, well, I'm going to motion to adjourn our meeting this morning. Do I have a second on that motion? Okay, we have a second from Manny Amano. Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.